Instead of turning to the government for a bailout during the financial crisis like Lloyds did, well, Barclays turned to money from the Middle East instead. But it's now facing an investigation and potential £50 million fine over whether those payments were legal and properly disclosed. Barclays says that the fees it paid, some £322 million that it paid to Qatari investors, were for what it called advisory services. But the authorities say that they amount to secret payments to secure the cash that the bank desperately needed. Well, Barclays disclosed that the Serious Fraud Office is now investigating those agreements, and that the US Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, are undertaking an investigation into whether the group's relationships are what it says compliant with the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It's also facing a payout today of about £100 million to 300,000 Barclays customers, those that took out personal loans with the bank. Barclays says interest could have been incorrectly charged, and after discovering that error, it will reimburse any customers affected, and it will launch an inquiry into whether Barclaycard, its credit card business, was also affected. So lots to get through. Let's speak to Chris Roebuck. He's a visiting professor at Cass Business School, and he's held a number of positions at international banks. Chris, hello to you as always. I just want to stick with this Barclays story. Well, in fact, two stories for Barclays today. Just with this SEC inquiry and the problems with this deal. It turned to the Middle East for money, it didn't turn to the government, but now real queries, real questions about whether it did that in the right way. What more do we know?
Well, effectively, there's a little bit of an accusation of murky goings-on from the regulators, and Barclays are saying, no, this is whiter than white, it was all above board. And inevitably, as the investigations continue, we will see whose opinion is right. But the key point there is that if it's got to the level where the regulators are getting seriously involved, somebody's interpretation in Barclays of what happened could be questionable. And this goes to the heart about the way banks behave, and indeed other organisations. It's not about what you think's happening, it's about the perception of other people about the way you are behaving. And that goes to the core about leadership in the organisation and people at the top making sure that everybody all the way down know what is the right behaviour and what is the wrong behaviour. And maybe that's failed here.
Well, as you said, it's about perception, isn't it? And that culture whereby banks, during the run-up to the financial crisis, many accused them of being too big, too greedy, putting profit first. Now that's all come home to roost.
Yeah, I mean, there's the point that I think there was a transition in certain parts of banks. Now, let's be absolutely clear. There are thousands and thousands of people who work for these institutions across the world who have always acted with utter integrity throughout their entire careers and who have always done the best by virtue of their clients. There are, however, a few who decided that what came first was making money, not necessarily looking after their clients, particularly those within the transactional parts of the banks. And that's where the problem is, that it doesn't matter if you're dealing with another bank, it doesn't matter if you're dealing on price, it's still about acting with integrity and acting with ethics, and that was lost in certain parts of those institutions.
Okay, as always, Chris, good to talk to us. Chris Roebuck there from Cass Business School. And of course, Barclays would say they've made a lot of change, a lot of reforms to the way they go about their business to make sure the culture of the bank has changed.